Good morning. I'm on. Very good. To any of our visitors and guests, welcome to Immaculate Heart of Mary. I'm Father Tom Miller, the pastor. Delighted to have you with us. Parishioners, always good to pray with you. Now, if you had come to the previous two Masses, it was just like a 30-second homily. But we all know now that hopefully the roads aren't as dangerous if we're careful, so you'll get my regular third Sunday homily. And it's not a homily, it's a sermon. On third Sundays for all of our visitors and guests, in the last 2 years I've been talking about various topics, according to Matthew Kelly's book, 4 Signs of a Dynamic Catholic. 2 years ago, on the third Sundays of the month, not third Sunday liturgically, it's fourth Sunday, we talked about prayer. And if you remember, one of the things that I kept repeating about prayer is that you and I have to make time to pray. If we just find time to pray, it will only be on the hinges of our lives and in desperate situations. Not a bad thing, but the Lord is looking for more than just desperation and goodbye and hello at the morning and the end. He's looking for a little more intimacy with you and I because of the friendship he wants to extend to us. So that's the first thing. That was 2 years ago. We still talk about prayer, but every third Sunday we talked about some dimension of prayer. Last year, not too long ago, was study. And Matthew Kelly builds it up in a natural process. If you and I are praying and seeking the Lord, then we ought to want to know more about this faith that he's given us. And that should lead us to study of the faith, whether it's Scripture, the Church's history, things about her liturgy, her call to service and worship, whatever it might be, that all takes desire. We have to have an interest in it, which is what prayer is trying to awaken, and then discipline to try to do it consistently. Prayer and study are all deliberate acts, and they set the stage, as we look at the book, for the deliberate act of generosity. Because here's hopefully one of the fruits of prayer and study, that you and I become aware of how incredibly blessed we are in our faith in Jesus Christ. And we want the Lord constantly to deepen that awareness that we've been profoundly blessed. Because our generosity flows from our awareness of our blessings. And we're not talking about generosity as digging dollars out of your wallet. I mean, that's part of generosity, but that's a very small part. I mean, there's a financial reality to it. And over these next 11 months, we want to look at the various things that encourage us to be generous, that are obstacles in our generosity, and what we're trying to do in our generosity. Ultimately, you and I, as I said, are generous because God has blessed us tremendously. And we realize that the blessings we have received pass through our hands and our hearts on to other people in various ways. It might be financial, but for most of us, and I want to really try to emphasize it this year, I want to look at what does it mean to have a generous heart, a generous attitude that allows us to be patient with people, that allows us to be forgiving, that allows us to take time in our hurried lives to listen to others. Those are all almost hidden aspects of generosity that we don't think about. Because too often we think about generosity as give us money or sign up. And those certainly are two aspects of generosity because we have a lot of sign-ups around here and a lot of hands out. And those are obvious aspects of generosity. But we also want to take a look at some of the more hidden realities that allow you and I to be generous. And I just want to talk about one today that we want to be able to identify, especially because we're coming up on the most materialistic time of the year. It's beautiful. We love Christmas, but we know it is super materialistic. And it's not greed. You and I would think, and some are free to differ with me, of course, that maybe greed is the biggest obstacle to generosity. If we're covetous, we want to hold on to our stuff. But not necessarily. There are greedy people who can be very generous. Usually their greed is more about acquiring more. They may not necessarily be too worried about giving, but it's always the acquisition that makes you and I greedy. We need more. We're constantly trying to find satisfaction in something else, something outside that we can possess. And we'll talk about that as an obstacle. But what really I think is the undermining sin for you and I in generosity, especially having a generous heart, is envy. Of all the 7 deadly sins, that is the one that constantly whispers to you and I to be dissatisfied with life. to be dissatisfied with God, what he is doing or what he is not doing. It constantly whispers in us to be dissatisfied with ourselves and especially with others. And of all the 7 deadly sins, it is the most joyless. And envy sits there eating away, believing that other people are more fortunate, other people have greater blessings, other people have had better breaks in life. And then envy whispers to us to do less, that we are justified in not responding in whatever way, that we don't have to be generous because after all, who has been generous to us? That's the lie that envy whispers to us constantly. I mean, we can look at this coming season next week and everything. There will be plenty of people who get more than all of us combined. And envy would have us be dissatisfied with what we received and resent what other people possess. And you and I want to combat that in our prayer and our study. The only way to do it is to be grateful, to really take nothing for granted and begin to act that way in our prayer and in our thinking, to realize how profoundly blessed we are. I mean, imagine if we were living 100 years ago. We wouldn't even be here at church. We'd be huddling around our fireplaces at home thinking, this is a day we're not going out. And we'd be hoping it didn't last too long because what? There were no weather forecasts. You might have your farmer's almanac that would tell you something, but that was it. No radio, well, maybe a few people did in urban areas, no TV, and we would just hope it got better. And we begin to look at things like something like that, just our ordinary circumstances of life, to begin to feed our gratitude. Because again, the more we become grateful because God has blessed us, the more we can respond with a generous heart, whether it's to our nation, our parish community, or our neighbors. And this year we want to look at that. Because I pray for you and I that we are aware of how tremendously blessed we are. That we can, in our prayer, begin to really list the things that are so tremendously good in our life. Not that we don't have challenges, I don't ever want to dismiss that, but to know how good it is to be people of faith today, in this age, and in this place. And to realize the gift, and I'll finish this a little time with the gospel. Jesus Christ is never called Emmanuel. He's just called Jesus, the Lord, the Christ. Never called Emmanuel, only mentioned by that in the prophecies. Why? Because that's what he is. He is God with us. It's almost as if the gospel writers are kind of smiling when they mention that name, because nobody's ever going to call him Emmanuel his whole life. But for those who are receptive and aware, for those who seek him out, they realize that he is indeed God with us. Please rise.